for the interview.
Good evening, everyone. Greetings to you all. Welcome to Connect Africa, to our daily session where we analyze what's happening in the continent and globally that matters to Africa with Kwame Gonza. I would say welcome to everyone and welcome to Kwame.
Thank you so much, Mahlet, and greetings as every day I do. And as always, I want to welcome everyone who's on the channel on Connect Africa. We appreciate you being part of this journey. This, we call it a journey.
Mhm.
So we are on a journey of correcting the narrative, the African narrative, or putting out the African narrative onto the global stage because a lot of things have been done for us for a long time, forcibly, of course, in many cases. Certain groups of people have forced themselves to do things for us. So we feel that it's time for us to do it for ourselves. And that includes in the media space. That is why Connect Africa was started as an alternative source of media and information on what is going on across the world and how it affects the continent. And of course, Connect Africa is even here to do much more. That is why we are asking for the support of everyone who is watching. Invite one more person on the channel and encourage them to subscribe to the channel. So uh, we hope that by next month, we have around 50,000 if everyone does that, because we have 25,000 people so far, close to 25,000. So we hope that by next month we will be 50,000. That is very important. Other than that, a lot of things are going on across the world, and we want to see, where do Africans fit in? Because our purpose on this channel is to always examine where do Africans fit in, where do we benefit from, both, regarding events which are going on in the continent and internationally, but especially internationally, we want to understand where do we fit in, because whether we want it or not, we do fit in, and we have to make a comment on that. And that is a mistake many, of course, Africans make. Even Mahlet, you remember during the Ukraine war, that when Africans wanted to participate and bring a solution, many people actually were objecting and saying Africa has enough problems, we should not participate. So the question we have always asked as a people, and as people who are concerned about the affairs of the African people, imagine that Africa was there in 1980, I mean in 1885, when they were partitioning the continent at the Berlin Conference. Imagine that Africa paid attention. So these are the consequences of us not participating in events, and certain things that are going on globally, because we have become a global village. So whether it is NATO, which is meeting, whether it is the Ukraine war, whether it is, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which are meeting, everything, concerns us as Africans, and we have to pay attention. So back to you, Mahlet. Thank you very much, everyone who is watching, and we want to appreciate you for being part of this journey.
Thank you very much, Kwame, for that intro and reminding our audience here to do what they have to do. It's a duty for us to come and report and analyze, and I think it's a duty for you people, the family here, also to share the video with others. Now, without further ado, the topic for today is NATO had just their 75th anniversary. Uh, all the members and the allies have celebrated that in the US. And in this meeting, what happened? It's something that we are going to analyze. Of course, our final part will be to bring that African perspective, how it will affect Africa. But to start with, it's always good to give a background. So, Kwame, before I go and ask you, what were the major highlights that from this meeting, this NATO 75th meeting? Uh, can you give us just a quick background on NATO? And we also have a new country that became a major non-NATO ally, which is Kenya. We don't have to talk about it, but I'm just saying. But yeah, who is NATO? How many countries? How does it work? Quickly.
Yeah, so thank you, Mahlet. I hope you can hear me very well.
Yeah,
Of course, Kenya is not an active participant in NATO, but it has, of course, it will have, is not even an observer. It doesn't have an observer status, but is a NATO friend. Of course, they made it sort of like a NATO, friend, but it's not an active participant. So, and of course, this was just a mockery. They are just mocking Ruto, to make him feel big, to make him feel important, so that they can use him, as we are seeing that they have been using him greatly. Yesterday I was in a program with Sister Shanice, and we were talking about this. And from our analysis, we saw that Ruto is just being used by the imperialists, and of course to divide the African continent, to keep it divided, which is of course unfortunate. But to go back to the topic, NATO is an organization which was formed after 1949. And the purpose of this, of course, when they were forming it, they said that it was to help to prevent another war from happening on the European continent. And the other thing was to combat the Soviet Union. They claimed that they wanted to combat the Soviet Union and how it was spreading its tentacles across the world, its influence. That's what I mean, across the world. So they felt it important to start NATO since the Soviet Union was becoming very powerful after 1944, 1945, that war. You remember that the Soviet Union actually fought together with the so-called Western allies, even though these so-called Western allies praised themselves. But many people could say that it is the Soviet Union which helped to end World War majorly, because it was able to defeat Hitler. Okay, so Hitler actually made a mistake of going to attack the Soviet Union. And everyone who has, many even people today have predicted that everyone who has attacked the Soviet Union, who has attempted to attack the Soviet Union, has ended up in the same way. And in Napoleon also, Napoleon of France also, what led to his defeat was because he attempted to go and attack the Soviet Union, to attack Russia. And Russia drove him all the way from over there until he was, completely weakened. And then they opened the doors for his defeat. And so Hitler, he was in the same adventures. And of course, the reasons for many of these Europeans to want to attack Russia, of course, is clear that Russia has enormous resources. Of course, many people talk about Africa, that Africa has a lot of resources, but Russia, compared to its population, it has huge resources, huge resources, a lot of land and huge amounts of gas, and other mineral raw materials, which are used in the manufacturing process. So Europe is a very small, small group of countries, if you look at it, and the influence which it has had, on the global stage, and the fact that between the 14th and 15th century, Europe was able to go out there, and 16th century, of course, was able to go out there and dominate, the world, and take over, huge chunks of land. Europe, I will come here and do an extensive analysis, but Europe, before the 15th century, they controlled less than 7% of the land mass on the planet. Now, later on, the Europeans, they moved out. And of course, due to different problems, chaotic problems in Europe, hunger and all these problems, and they were able to go out to the world and take over other people's lands. And of course, that's the United States, which you see today. And of course, you can speak of Canada, you can speak of, Australia and New Zealand. So today, as we speak, they control more than, 30%, almost 30%. So imagine people who controlled only 6%, around 6% of the world, the land mass, the global land mass. they multiplied themselves, and of course that came with the reproduction. So they started controlling all of the land of the United States and killing, of course. They killed over a number of people. About, I think they say that almost 10 million indigenous people on the American continent, the North American continent, and Canada also. They killed all of the people who owned the land, and they took it over. And the same thing happened in Australia and New Zealand, of course. So now they control huge chunks of land. Now the United States comes later on, and they form, in Washington. That is where they signed it, where they signed the formation of North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This organization, actually, Nkrumah also wrote about it in his book as a threat, to the, the existence of the global South, especially, and the peaceful world, because of what it was starting to engage in during that period in the 1960s. So America helps them to form this, and they say it was to combat the Soviet Union, and also to, as they say today, the rhetoric today which you hear is that it is an organization which is going to defend themselves. This for defense, European defense. So when you ask, what are they defending themselves for, or what are they defending themselves against, you don't see that, because they are the biggest military powers. When you look at the United States, they have the biggest militaries across the world. So it is difficult to see what they are defending themselves against. China doesn't want to fight with them. It is always preaching peace. Let us do everything, peacefully. So you ask, what does NATO or really want to defend itself against, on the global stage? Is it Russia? Russia, even when Putin came to power, he was making gestures towards NATO that, they should open doors for, for Russia also to join NATO. So when you ask the question, why and what is it that they are defending themselves against? And I think that that question can only be answered with what NATO has been doing itself. Because what we are seeing that NATO has been doing is rather attacking the innocent and weak countries. Even though they say that they created this organization for the defense of Europe, and of course, combating what they call the communism and combating the Soviet Union. And we have seen that the Soviet Union is not, which is Russia today, is not interested in attacking Europe. Is rather interested in helping Europe. So then another question arises there: what is really NATO for? If it is not the rhetoric, the normal rhetoric that is being put out there by the United States and the Europeans in expanding NATO, since the 1945, since 1949 and 1989, with the collapse of the Soviet Union. Because remember, the Soviet Union collapsed, and it became Russia. And later, when Russia came on board, it liberalized. Actually, it started following the neoliberal system of economic doctrine from the West. So there was no threat. But the United States and Europe kept expanding NATO, which started with a few countries. Now huge numbers of countries are in there, and new countries are being added. Sweden, Finland, and all these countries are being added, and now they are fighting to add, Ukraine. So what we are seeing is that an organization which started out with the claim that it is, going out there to help protect Europe and combat communism, has become a different monster. And the observation which we are having now is the activities which this organization has been engaged in, and also the core policies of the United States and the European countries, and their place, of course, in the world today. I think those clearly explain what the organization is about today, which was created for a different, reason which they mentioned after, 1949 and then 1989 with the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Thank you very much, Kwame. Yeah, thank you very much, Kwame, for that. I was hearing my echo. Now let's go to what happened. This is 75th anniversary of NATO summit. What were the major highlights that you want us to know? And as an African, which are particularly, that we should pay attention?
Yeah, so in reality, so what they said at this opening, they are trying to review. Of course, this is our annual summit. This is 1950, the 75th summit. They call it the 75th summit, and it's being held in Washington, which of course they see this as very important. And this organization, just to go a little bit back, represents about 13 to 16%, because the Europeans and the people of European descent, because if you look at the United States, Canada, Australia, all these are Europeans and people of European descent. They constitute about 16%, 13 to 16%. But I think it's precisely 16% of global population. And remember, I told you that in the 15th, around the 15th century, from the 10th to the 15th century, these people were about just 7% of the global population. That was their percentage. But with the conquering of new lands and exterminating the indigenous people of those lands, their population exploded, and now they are 16% of the global population. They control about 30% of global land mass that I mentioned very well. So NATO currently constitutes countries which altogether are more than a billion people, which is close to around 16%. The European countries and all the other countries, if you put it together, like the United States, Canada, and Australia, and all these, because all of them, the Europeans, are part of NATO. Now, these minority, in reality, even though they were saying that they have created NATO to protect themselves, they have objectives, all right? They have objectives which they want to achieve or to continue, as we have analyzed here when it comes to Africa as a continent. The continent itself was dominated, and they want to keep it in that position, all right? And of course, different methods have been used to keep Africa in that, that state of being dominated. Of course, you can talk of the global South also. You can talk of Latin America, which has been suffering under the yoke of neocolonialism, which is the United States. If you talk of the Banana Republic, what they used to call the Banana Republic, it came from South America due to the suffering it has been going through with the United States. The United Fruit Company, which was a banana company, had taken over almost all of Latin America. So a few American individuals and corporations had taken over, Latin America as their property. All right. So when you look at NATO today, it's like it is in the tradition of continuing to impose the European way of thinking on majority of the world. And this rhetoric, you can hear it at this summit, which is going on today. They're talking about democracy, all right? They're talking about democracy. And when you look at what President Ibrahim Traore, his speech which he gave at the AES summit, which just ended last weekend, he said that they have three words which they use, which they normally rely on. They say democracy, all right? Democracy, freedom of speech. I think which other word did he say there? Democracy, freedom of speech, and human rights. All right, he mentioned the three words: freedom, democracy, and human rights. These are the three words which they have. Now, the claim is all these good things, these three good things, but the reality is the same. Now, our interpretation of that, and of course, that is what even is going on today. That's what they are saying. When you listen to it, I've listened to Biden. They say they're trying to protect Ukraine and then try to protect it from Russia. But as it has gone on, of course, the intentions, their real intentions, they have seeped out into the public, and now we understand what they are trying to do. And even when you look at the history, all the history of these countries, because the group constitutes only colonial countries, okay? Only colonial countries, majority colonial countries, including Japan, because remember, Japan is also part of them. And Japan colonized China, and Japan still has problems with China because of the atrocities which Japan committed against, against the Chinese. So they don't like each other. Now, these are the group of countries, they are like sort of like gangsters or criminal. Is a group of, a gang of gangsters who have teamed up and said, we were the colonialists. Now let us form a different organization. And if you see, these organizations, all of them were formed after 1945 with the Bretton Woods Conference, all right, which led to the formation of the International Monetary Fund, which of course the people in Kenya are demonstrating against the International Monetary Fund. So you can see the purpose for which these institutions were, created, to hide behind doing good and while causing a lot of harm to the, to the greater part of the world. And of course, this rhetoric is to impose, this rhetoric is used to impose a certain narrative, including, of course, the control over the media, impose a certain narrative onto the rest of the world by these people who look like they are aristocrats. Okay, and of course you can't call them aristocrats, the modern day aristocrats, because the aristocrats, they normally existed during that period of the monarchies, in antiquity, when there was monarchs all over, the globe. Now, the rest are supposed to be their servants. And again, this is depending on the rhetoric that is coming from there. It's like we are telling you what to do. You should go and do this. You should go and do that. Countries like Britain, the United States, France, and mostly the Western European countries. Okay. And consistently, they have claimed that they are protecting themselves and protecting human rights and democracy. But the rhetoric now is seeping into talking about China and North Korea and demonizing. Right now, they are now demonizing even China. So the real intentions have come out. I remember I did an analysis on the consensus class about the Ukraine war, how it started. About I think it was 2021, and I said that the Ukraine war actually is not really about Russia or Ukraine, but it's about China. They are trying to fight against China, but that war will end up in Africa. The prize which they are fighting over is the African continent. Even though they are fighting, you see that they are fighting the war in Ukraine, and they are trying to fight with Russia. They want to defeat China, but all of them are fighting over the prize, which is the control over the African continent. And of course, the Europeans too, they want to control the Russian landmass. That is clear. They want it because of the resources which I mentioned about it. That they want it. And that was the purpose of Napoleon going to attack Russia, because of the resources. He used to talk about it plainly. And Hitler too, because he considered that Europe is too small. I remember I started with pointing out to you that the Europeans, why they left Europe, in the 15th and the 16th century, was because the place was too small for them. They saw that the place was too small. It doesn't have a lot of resources. How are they going to survive? And that is why they went and conquered new lands and destroyed the people. So this, this psyche is still existent within the European mind. And of course, the United States is Europe. These are Europeans. So they still carry it that Russia, they're supposed to conquer Russia. Okay? But Africa also is part of that chessboard, is a part on the chessboard, that it has to completely and totally be dominated and taken over, and the resources, owned, without us, owning anything. And we are supposed to be, of course, like they see us, like President Ibrahim Traore said, they see us as slaves. We are supposed to be perpetual slaves to them. So this is what, they are painting at this summit, and they are strategizing towards achieving these objectives, if you examine what they are doing. So instead of the freedom and the democracy which they have been promising us for the last 50 years, the world has increasingly, been led into chaos. Increasingly, we have seen, chaos in the Middle East, and even, in our Libya here, that Libya was completely destroyed, and this is the NATO. So this is the interpretation we can get from this kind of organization, however much it talks about freedom, democracy and human rights. Rather, what we see is that the lives of millions of people are being turned upside down and destroyed. Countries are destroyed. And this is the NATO. This is what NATO stands for: destruction. We have not seen any, we have not seen any good thing coming from this organization. We have not seen any freedom. So the summit itself is coming at the head of course, of claims of Russia, bombing, and this has been spoken about, hugely, during the summit. They said this, that Russia bombed children in Ukraine, and of course, which Russia denied even at the United Nations. The Russian representative at the United Nations has denied that Russia bombed any hospital children. But this has been put out, of course, in their media, and say that Russia bombed children. And of course, this you can interpret it as they are looking to escalate. They are trying to prepare NATO. We have seen people like Macron saying that he wants to send troops into Ukraine. Macron has been saying this, that he will not rule out, sending troops into Ukraine. And of course, they are facing a lot of challenges. The summit itself is coming at a period when they are facing a lot of challenges economically. You see, the United States has a lot of economic problems. The automotive industry, which they relied on, China is taking over. Is taking over the whole automotive industry. That's why the US has put on tariffs up to 100% on Chinese automobiles, so that Chinese cars cannot come inside. What else does the United States export? It exports. Does it export semiconductors? It's not the leader in semiconductors. So it exports weapons and maybe software, which he calls intellectual property. Those are the two things. It doesn't manufacture anything today as the United States. So he exports all the fields and aircraft, of course. So the automotive industry, Japan took it over, and Germany has been a competitor. And now they are fearful of the fact both of them now are becoming radicalized. The US and its European allies are becoming radicalized because China is taking over the automobile industry. So the hostility towards China is increasing. So these last days, they have been mentioning China. Now they came from Russia. Now they have been mentioning China. China is the enemy. China is the enemy. China is this. But China has not, made any aggressive moves towards the United States or European countries. It is instead being inviting them. They should cooperate instead of putting sanctions. But the thing is, they don't want to cooperate because they don't want you to make progress in key technologies, key global technologies, because they see themselves as the sole owners of these technologies, and therefore no one else should have them. When you're talking about aircraft manufacturing, if you talk about automobile manufacturing, so if you make progress there, they see it as a threat. They will either come and destroy it and destroy it for you, or they find a way of limiting you from, making further progress. So the summit is looking as if it's a preparation for NATO to enter a deep war with not only Russia, but also China. All right. So the NATO countries, if you remember this month, the US, and in fact, all the NATO countries said that Ukraine is now allowed to attack Russia, inside Russia. They have been mentioning this. All right. So what I'm seeing with the speeches which they are giving out, which are anti-Russia and anti-China, it is an attempt to broaden the war, to prolong the war with hope of defeating Russia, or to have NATO actively involved in this war. They want to prolong the war. Of course, more Ukrainians are going to die, with the hope that they will be able to wear out Russia, or they want to have Russia actively they want to have NATO actively involved. Biden, for example, praised how they are stronger, that NATO is now more stronger because it is coming in and bringing more people, and it is expanding or all across Europe, and taking in countries which were previous the Soviet countries. And of course, this is what has been angering also Russia, as we've seen on many occasions, and many analysts like John Mashima talking about the fact that the United States continued moving towards eastwards to Russia's border, and which Russia did not feel that is a good thing, because it is this route through Ukraine where people like Napoleon and Hitler, they used to attack Russia. So that's why Russia is very serious on this and say, you cannot come here and use Ukraine to attack us. So this is the problem that we are seeing. So Biden said that they have increased the spending on defense. All the other NATO countries, and now they're going to spend at least 2% of their GDP on defense. And what is interesting, again, is that there's some level of arrogance which I saw with the Americans. So really, they are not really only arrogant with us as African countries, but they are also arrogant. They bully even the Europeans. That's what I saw with the Americans. Because Lloyd Austin, when he was giving his speech today, he said that the European countries, they have mobilized them to spend on defense at least 2%. And then he said, after saying that of course all this spending is going to go to the production of weapons by American companies and create American jobs. So I was surprised that he said this thing. I was shocked that he said this thing, and the people are clapping for him. So the Europeans are going to spend money on American manufacturing of weapons of war, and the Americans who are going to get the jobs. And of course, this is how the Americans, the United States made a lot of money during World War II, because it did not participate actively. It participated later on. It was the one manufacturing the weapons while the Europeans are fighting. They were fighting against each other, and the US was the one making the weapons and making a huge amount of money. So at the end of the war in 1944, 1945, the US was rich. It was even borrowing them money so that they can fight. You see, so it was indebting them. Europe was being indebted to the United States. So there is that element also of bullying, even though they are the same people, they are descendants. Of course, the United States, these are their original ancestors. The Europeans are the ancestors of the Americans, but there is still the element of bullying. It's not only the global South that is bullied. So you could hear this when Lloyd Austin, who's the Secretary of Defense of the United States, when he was speaking in his speech at the NATO, you could hear it absolutely plainly said that, of course, these weapons which are going to be produced, American companies are the ones we are going to produce. We have mobilized all these, and then it's going to create jobs in the United States. So I thought that was really, interesting, and at the same time, scary. But the Europeans, of course, were just clapping their hands. And of course, we saw Blinken also came up and, continued his lies. When you see Blinken, of course, you expect lies. United States has around 100,000 troops in Europe. This is what Biden mentioned. But we are seeing is escalation, which is being signed with the so-called signing of defense pact with Ukraine. That is the claim that they signed the pact. That is what also Biden said, that they signed a defense pact with Ukraine, and and of course the lies continued. There's a lot of lies which have been said at this NATO summit, that Russia and its allies are losing, and of course they pointed to China, that China is the one who's helping Russia. So if they are helping Ukraine, I don't know how. I don't know how they want Russia not to have any helpers. So this is where it beats my understanding, in one way or the other. But of course, the NATO Secretary General was also, I think he's the Secretary General. Yes, Stoltenberg was given a medal by President Biden at this particular summit for his service. I think he's stepping down, and they are appointing a different Secretary General for NATO. Yeah, so basically those are the few observations which I made at this 95th, 75th NATO summit that is happening in Washington.
Thank you very much, Kwame. That was indeed useful. So we know now how, this organization NATO is operating, how it was established, and some of the examples that it has put its hand in some of the wars that are happening. Not some, actually, we can say maybe all the wars that are happening globally. Now, in terms of looking at the future or the fate of this organization called NATO, the Northern Atlantic Treaty Organization, what is its fate, its future? It's because what is happening, the decision NATO is taking, and what happens to NATO directly or indirectly will affect Africa.
Yeah, so I think that this is an attempt to hang on. After colonialism, after slavery and colonialism were defeated, there was an attempt by European countries, of course, to hang on. And of course, they have decided to try to hang on through instruments like the International Monetary Fund. The NATO is the military arm of the neo-colonial, institution. The neo-colonial project. The neo-colonial project has a commercial arm, and then it has a military arm. The commercial arm, and of course the media arm. So the neo-colonial project is like an empire, all right, which constitutes these countries. They have a military arm, which is NATO, and which goes around the world and spreads chaos. And of course, we have seen even Germany and Britain coming to the South China Sea with their military vessels. So this is what it represents. That's NATO. So there is an attempt to hang on. These are just hangovers. Neocolonialism was just a hangover from slavery and colonialism. That desire to dominate the world, to continue to dominate the world and have a single story. Everyone was supposed to be pushed into that single story. The Caucasians, the Europeans were supposed to be the holders of the great wealth of the earth. And like I showed you that they moved from controlling 7% of the earth to controlling 30% of the earth. Now they own 30%. They moved from owning just 30%, annihilated and killed, exterminated people on other lands like America, Australia, New Zealand, and of course South America, and took over lands, and now they control 30%. They own now 30% from just 7%. So America now has sought to selectively isolate out the best, among the intellectuals in the global South, to integrate them into American society. And this is, of course, after the defeat of slavery and the defeat of systems like apartheid, which was present in the United States itself. Now we have people like we have mentioned Lloyd Austin, who were integrated into Africans were now integrated. You see Linda Thomas, you see Lloyd Austin, you see General Michael Langley of Africa Command, US Africa Command. So all these are Africans. Now they got a chance to be integrated within NATO, institutions, the white institutions, the white supremacist institutions, to be used as pushers of this system, which wanted to continue to secure benefits, the benefits of the earth, the great wealth of the earth, for the whites, for the Europeans and people of European descent. So this project today has continued on, as I've already mentioned, but of course it is facing a lot of resistance. Unlike colonialism and slavery, where you would come by force, like and take over countries by force. Now you have to do it covertly. That's why you have institutions like the CIA, of course, which is part of those, neo-colonial empire institutions. So now you have to do it covertly. All right, you have to do things like coups, and you have to stir up color revolutions within countries. You see, so the future of NATO as an organization is very unclear, because it is struggling to contain Russia in itself. Is very much struggling, and a lot of other countries have become strong. If you look at India, too, is not towing that line. Prime Minister Modi has just left, Russia. He visited Russia, after the invitation of President Putin, and of course, to great condemnation from the West. They are condemning him, and from the look of things, if you look at the body language during this summit, it looks like Modi, they are in very good terms with the President Putin. The hugs and and the gestures which they were exchanging with each other, it showed that they are in great terms. They are in good terms, and of course they are members of BRICS. So the rise of BRICS, China, Russia, India, is showing that this institution is going to have a lot of problems. It may succeed in the short term, but they cannot use force, even though they have this overwhelming military power. They cannot they cannot do it like how they used to do it during slavery and colonialism. All right. So now they have to use deception, like how you see Iraq. You see that during Iraq, massive propaganda and lies had to be employed. Same with Afghanistan, same with Libya. Huge propaganda had to be employed to justify the attack. And of course, with the Syria and stuff like that. And even in Ukraine, you can see that the propaganda, a lot of propaganda, and even shutting down the Russian narrative, so that people will not hear what Russia is saying. Okay, so that people will be able to think for themselves. They want to have one narrative. So NATO's future, regardless of how powerful they are, is very uncertain, with the rise of new nations like BRICS nations, especially, who are asserting themselves. We are seeing Iran, of course, which they are Iran too, which they have wanted to destroy for a very long time. We are seeing Israel also, which they have been claiming that is an invisible country, struggling with the Hamas, who are not even a functional country, and of course with the Hezbollah, struggling, a lot of problems. So in one way or the other, this could be the announcement of, not totally the disappearance or whatever they said, the decline, but the weakening of the United States, and the weakening of the imperialist order, and the weakening of the neoliberal system and the neo-colonial system. It shows that it has really been weakened to a great extent. And NATO itself is struggling even to justify its existence. It is struggling to justify itself. Why is it there? Because seriously, if you look around the world, there's really no threat to them that they should be expanding their military capabilities and increasing expenditure on the military, unless it is for, subjugating the rest of the world. because the United States alone is spending more than the whole world combining on military. So what is it that they are, spending so much on to, to protect themselves against? Is it that they are expecting some aliens to come from the moon or from planet Mars, and they want to protect, from protect? This is something I've been thinking about. Are they expecting aliens to come to planet that they are preparing weapons to protect the whole Earth? So it's interesting, to see.
You never know. Maybe they will come. Maybe that's what they're preparing for. You never know with these people.
Yeah. So, but on the look of things, what we see from a Pan-African perspective is that there's that desire to continue dominating the world, and of course to subjugate the rest of the world under that one narrative, that single story, and which is the European story. Okay, so for us as Africans, I don't think that we are very weak as we see, or sometimes we say that we are very weak. We are not as weak as we say, and we have seen this with the events that culminated into Kenya, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. So the solutions are always there. There's a need to continually seek them out. We have to understand that our continent is not going to develop unless we bring it together and start rebuilding it rapidly. Because we have mentioned that we have three key important resources right now as Africans, which are going to help us to take off as a continent. All right. So these problems, which have been exposed with the defeat of the United States, and it ran out from Afghanistan, where it went to attack innocent people, farmers. It was defeated by these farmers, and then these problems which it is having in Ukraine, the economic problems in France and Europe, huge economic problems. These things are even only reminiscent to what happened during World War II, that Europe emerged from that with a lot of problems, a lot of economic problems. So it shows us that it is time for us to get our act together as Africans. And our solution is in working together, in seeing the continent as a single entity. All right. This generation, I'm especially speaking to this generation, 50 years coming downwards, because that's where the hope is. I believe there's a lot of hope there. Of course, this does not mean that if you are 70 or 80 or 100, you don't matter to us as a continent. But I believe that the generation, from 50 years coming downwards to 18 years, I think that those people, they have enough energy, and they are the future, which is going to push this continent to the next, before they leave also, and give it to the next generation. So it is incumbent on us now to start thinking and strategizing and looking at the resources which are very important, which we have as a continent, need to be reorganized rapidly and a unified front. We have to forget about the old leaders on the continent, all the heads of state who are on the continent are misleading the continent, taking it and tearing it apart and making it weaker and weaker every day. Because each day, at least, you are hearing one territory wanting to separate itself. You are hearing Biafra wants to separate itself from Nigeria. You are hearing in Cameroon, another territory wants to separate itself. So we have these problems. South Sudan separated itself from Sudan. So instead of us making ourselves stronger, we are rather making ourselves weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker, much more weaker. A lot of countries with weakness. But it is up to this generation now to understand that we have to build this continent as a unit. We have three key resources on this African continent. One, our human resource. Okay, if you look at the continent, about 1.5 billion people, and if you add the diaspora, we could be around 2 billion, more than 2 billion people. Actually, we are the biggest nation if you add us all together with the diaspora. We are the biggest nation on earth, more than 2 billion people. All right, our diaspora in the US, in Brazil, and everywhere who are out there. We are more than 2 billion people. All right, and we have this land. All right, that's number one. Our population is huge. The reason why China has been able to succeed, however it has succeeded, is because of its huge population. Even if the United States puts sanctions on its companies, they go back in China and grow. And we have seen the example of Huawei. It can't be destroyed. You see, you cannot destroy it. So this is a huge advantage for us as Africans. Also, we have the ability to build these corporations. We have our population will provide the same market which we need. If we are running under a single government, we are running under one government as Africans, and of course with different states, and in which we celebrate our diversities, and of course with our tribes, which in many cases we call nations. This does not prevent us having a single government does not prevent us from having our tribes and celebrating our diversity as a people. So the literacy rate, we have more than 70% if you combine us, with the diaspora. Our literacy rate right now is 70%. You should be able to get good labor from all that population. So our population is the number one asset that we have. Number two, we have a GDP, a combined GDP as African continent of $3.5 trillion. $3.5 trillion. If you look at, and of course that GDP which we have today as a continent, we are underproducing, we are underutilizing our population, our labor which we have as a continent. The productivity is very low as a continent. Actually, our GDP, if you compare it with the global GDP and the population productivity level, our population is around almost 18% of global population. So our GDP should be around $18 trillion, because in the world there's close to around $101 trillion. So number two asset which we have is the GDP, our combined GDP as a continent, which is $3.5 trillion. That could act as a capital. Now, number three, we have our mineral resources and land. We could dig our land. We could take out our mineral resources and build industries and factories. We have the water platforms like the Inga Dam. We have solar energy in the Sahara and the Kalahari Desert in Namibia. All right. So, and what do you need? If you are talking about production, you need what they call in economics factors of production. You need just the three things. What is called the factors of production is capital, land, and mineral resources, which I've already spoken about. You need capital, which is the $3.5 trillion, which I've said are out of GDP, combined GDP of the African continent. And you need labor, which is the population. So we have everything that is necessary for us to make the African, continent a great continent. We are underproducing, actually. We should produce about 6 times what we are producing right now. Our economy should be around $18 trillion as a continent. 18 trillion.
Actually, hearing you, I'm sorry, but don't forget your point. But having all those necessary resources to us, we don't even need anyone out of the continent, not even for trade. The trade within Africa by itself is more than enough. Yeah,
Is enough. It's just production. The production is the issue. But now, what am I saying is that with these problems that we see that are happening on the global stage, they are announcing to us that we are supposed to reorganize ourselves as a continent, and rapidly. We should do that rapidly. All right, we should do that rapidly. The events of the 1945, in 1945, the chaos in Europe. These are the events which are announced to that generation that independence has come now. Now we are supposed to fight for independence. And of course, it did not happen immediately. It did not happen immediately, because remember, between 1945 and 1955, that's a period of 10 years. And if you add 2 years, 1957, when Ghana got its independence, is around a period of 12 years. So we are supposed to start now. So this moment we are in today, with these problems NATO's going with, is having a decline of economic chaos. They are going into wars and spending on weapons, not really productivity, is an announcement to our generation as Africans that the time is up for us to be able to act and get real independence for the African continent and all African people across the world. Thank you very much, Mahlet.
Thank you very much, Kwame. It feels so much like, being in a class. And thanks again, for all your time. I'm sure, there's a time investing in this. Really, thank you. Keep on what you are doing. And there's a lot of engagement here in the chat section. people are really loving it. Here's a family, what you bring on a daily basis, and with the historical background, definitely, and analyzing the contemporary and predicting what's going to happen and how Africa should react or respond to that. And most of the things what Kwame says, actually, we find them after few months or something happening. Uh, and wow, like, hopefully there is an ear, an eye watching this program. And those of you who, if there is anyone in your network that you think might be able to advise any government or state that we raise here and discuss, please share it. Yeah, really share the video with your network. Thanks again. I'm just looking at if there is a question. Other than if there's no question, actually, that's it for us. Thank you for being here. I mean, I will give you 2 minutes or something as we conclude. Thank you for rooting, for your time, for tuning, for your support, your comments, your questions, your suggestions, for your donation. I saw somewhere someone on Super Chat donating 10 euro. Thank you very much. We really, really appreciate. As we always say, we don't take it for granted. It's you that keeps us, doing what we love to do, because we cannot say that everything is smooth and easy for us to be here daily, but knowing that you are here, that's what keeps us going. So thank you. Luz Gorban, I don't know if I pronounced your last name right, but he's a very interesting guest. Love this guy, and many love what you bring. That's just one of, from many. Your comments here, seeing this, the children that the collective West accused Russia of kidnapping were miraculously found in Germany. Thank you, Black, for reminding the family here to share. Sinovia in the Ruto was not smiling but grinning, like, yeah, in that picture will go down to history. And what an embarrassing picture, the one in White House. Oh my God. And Sinovia, thank you very much, for being here and for your continued support to our PayPal account. It's through our PayPal account. Thank you. I'm sure you wouldn't like it that me saying this, but we have to give a credit. And those of you who are here as well. Cindy said, okay, true what Kwame, the European tribal wars, or in bracket, erroneously called World War I and World War II, were as a result of Germany's desire to have bigger territories with more resources on the African continent. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All of them, those wars were fought over control over colonies. That's what they were fighting over. So, and it's the same thing. Remember what I told you in our analysis, that even though you are saying that they are fighting over in Ukraine, but the prize they are fighting over is the African continent. They want to fight China and remove it from the continent, the African continent, and continue that exploitation. And that is why you see that the IMF and the World Bank have come back heavily. All right, they have come back to the continent heavily, and they are demonizing Chinese lending to Africa, even though the figures are showing us that the Chinese hold about 13%, only 13% of Africa's external debt. But they say China is burdening Africa with debt. And the Western institutions, the countries and institutions, they hold 77% of Africa's debt. But they are saying China is burdening Africa with debt. Yet our debt payments, majority, 77% of our debt payments, they go to the West, the United States and European countries and Japan and all these. So it's interesting, There's somebody who asked for my email. I think Remy Nana.
You can
Uh,
just
yeah, maybe she can leave her own, and I will write to her if she wants to write. And I saw somebody who asked, is Kwame a leftist, a socialist? I think that my answer to that is that if you look, I really don't believe so much in that. I believe in what is best. If you asked Nkrumah, I think Nkrumah, when he was asked during his last days, what was he? Was he a Marxist? Was he a what? Was it that? Uh, he said that he is a scientific socialist. Uh, so, and then he said that if that means being a communist, then he's a communist. There's this desire to divide the world into East and West, and all these isms with capitalism and then socialism. But what do really Africans want? So I stand for what the Africans want, what is just for us as a society, as Africans. Is it just for us to have street people and people cannot afford to eat? Is it just for us to have people on streets who cannot take care of themselves and homeless people? This is not just, and that is not something which I stand for. Is it just for us to have people who go to bed with empty stomachs in our society? So I believe that we have enough resources for us, especially the African continent, who have more than, at least more than $700 trillion of material resources in the ground. I believe that we have enough resources to take care of everyone, in our continent. Now, does this tantamount to being a socialist or is a so-called leftist? If it is, then I am. But if it doesn't, and it just tantamounts to being, a proud African who thinks that the continent should take care of all its citizens, then definitely I'm that. I'm just an African, and I'm not any of that.
actually, it seems that CNDS might have given answer to Gizeh Geta, who asked this. Something similar to you. It says, Gizeh Geta, Africans in general are not obsessed with left-right politics. They are pragmatic and therefore consider each issue on its own merits.
Yeah, so it's pragmatism. I think that the person saying pragmatism, but the thing is this: what works and is going to help us to lift our people out of poverty is what we implement. We should not, we should not be held hostage to, you know, uh, this side or that side, this kind of thinking, and that side of, that kind of thinking, whether it's capitalism, socialism, or communism, or something like that. So what works is what we should implement so that we can lift our people from poverty, and so that everyone should be able to benefit in that new society that we want to build as Africans. So I think that is more important than us defining ourselves as socialism. Also, if you come with a socialistic policy and it works, then we implement it. If you come with a policy which is capitalist and is not parasitic in its nature, then we implement it. We see the United States right now under President Joe Biden, the lead, strategist of Joe Biden's policy is he came out and rubbished the free market economic policies. Who's Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor of the United States, of the White House, came out and his inaugural speech, he rubbished, market capitalism, and he said that the government has to intervene. So these policies, if you look at all his speech, you can say that, oh, maybe he's a socialist. But these are imperialistic capitalists. Okay, so they do things when they fit. Now they are imposing, the Inflation Reduction Act of the United States. These are socialistic policies. All right, the Obama's health care, Obamacare, these are socialistic policies. So they choose here and there when they want. Now, for us, when we implement something that is good for our people, as long as it takes money from their pocket, then they come and demonize us and say, because it is taking money from them, they demonize you and say you're a communist. Why are you a communist? We don't like communism and stuff like that. But what they don't tell you is that you are taking money from our pocket and you are making the lives of your people better. So I believe that is a trap. This is a trap which they are trying. This East and West is just a trap which they try to set for us. And if we fall in it, then we are caught. but we should do what is best for us. What China has done, whether the cat, I think it's Deng Xiaoping who said that whether the cat, he doesn't care whether the cat is green, is black or white. Does it catch the mouse? So what he meant, he doesn't care about socialism or capitalism. Does it work? What is working in society and creating wealth and making the lives of people improved? What is improving the lives of people, in society? The biggest number of people in society, and then can you balance, that development, that improvement which has come with the implementation of your policies in society? So if you can balance that and then not cause a society which has huge income gaps, the haves and the have-nots, then definitely, those are policies which work. So I think that these, these are policies which we can think of, when we unify our continent, definitely. Back to you, Mahlet.
It's also, yeah, more than was it another one? Patricia also asked for your email. I think it's better to drop if you have one instead of writing them, I suggest. You're muted.
Okay, so let me give them my email.
Yeah. Yeah, somebody commented. I wanted to react to one of the comments here.
Yeah, so they can see the email. I've posted it in.
Somebody, I forgot the name or I couldn't locate it back, but I remember I read a comment saying that, the Africans in the diaspora should come back and build Africa. I mean, it's definitely, that's of course without a question. But also some of us, we think that, we are far, we are in the diaspora, we can't do anything. It seems that sometimes very complicated and long road, but it's not. Until we start it, we don't know how long that will take. It takes us. So, study the country, what kind of the opportunities there are, what is lacking. As Kwame said, manufacturing is what we need. So, there are many, from light or small scale manufacturing to the heavy one, to heavy industry. So you can start with small things, but take your own study, and maybe after that,
And
after
even,
you know what you can do, contact the embassies in your country. For example, we are discussing with the Sahel states diplomats where we are, and kind of facilitate how we can contribute to that economy, at the same time benefit as an African, because that's what they want, because they encourage Africans and their own people to be part of it. It's really not that complicated. We all
no,
come
you
with
don't have
something.
to come, you don't have to completely come. You can come and pay visits and make connections with people on the ground and inquire. It starts like that. There's a lot of things you can do because foreign money here does a lot of things. Like the dollar does a lot of things in Africa. A few dollars, 1,000, 5,000, you can buy big land, pieces of land with a couple of thousands of dollars. So, I mean, there's a lot of things which you can do. There's a lot of consulting organizations, like the organization which I work for, which is called USG Consult, USG Consultants. You find out information from them. I want to invest in this. Is this feasible? Is it justifiable? And they can help you on the ground. And of course, I also appreciate the fact that some people say, okay, they have been scammed, of course, on numerous occasions when they came and stuff like that. But definitely, I think that it requires to do due diligence. But even when you are a big thinker, when you are a big thinker and you are thinking long term that I want to establish myself on the continent, I think that propaganda of people saying that, okay, they have been scammed. Okay, I don't deny that some people have been scammed in Africa, but you think beyond that. You think beyond at that, and instead think about finding a way of really establishing yourself and owning part of being part of that continent. Because many, even the diaspora, of course, sometimes we will say, oh, we were supposed to have free land, we were supposed to get land. But me, myself, I've never gotten free land, even as you see me here. The small land which my father left me is too small even for us as a family to share and live on it, is too small. So a lot of other people, they don't have land, and we have to find our own money to buy our own land from other people. So I think that is also not a very big issue. But the point I'm trying to make is that the ways are always there for you to come and establish yourself and contribute to the growth of the continent. We have to make, and it's especially, I think, if you start through the circles, like this circle which we have here, we make our discussions with programs. So you find solutions. Definitely, the people are, are there who can help.
Yeah, I think we kind of addressed uh, some of the issues mentioned here. Yeah, thank you very much. What can there is a lot that's coming also at Connect Africa. Last time we mentioned as well. I really want to kind of test the water, as they say. Let us know. Drop an email to us if you are interested to go, I mean, to visit an African country. We want to start from Ethiopia and maybe also, I mean, it depends, maybe Ghana, but for now, Ethiopia. And let us know, not in the comment section, but by email, if you are interested for such program, to have a tour which will also introduce you not only the historical part but also opportunities, how you can invest or just get to know to the country.
Mike,
Yeah.
I think you should put the email in the comment section. You should put Connect Africa's email in the comment section, or rather, I don't know.
I will put it.
Yeah, I'm seeing Sinovia is saying that she will go to Kenya. Yeah, of course, Kenya is even is a neighbor to is a neighbor to Ethiopia. So Mahlet is talking about going to Ethiopia. So you can check it out. You can go to Kenya and then just fly about a few minutes, about 30 minutes. I think. It should be around 30 minutes or something to Addis Ababa. I don't know how long.
45, yeah.
45 minutes, yeah. You can fly to Addis Ababa too. So you can go to Kenya, or you can go with Mahlet. You can start with Mahlet and register with Mahlet. And what Connect Africa is organizing. Then you fly to Ethiopia. You see Ethiopia, and from there you fly to Kenya, because it's just 45 minutes. Via Ethiopia Airlines,
Oh,
and you
she
go and
has
see what.
been to Ghana several times. Oh, there
Oh,
we
okay.
go.
Oh, that's interesting.
Nice. Yeah, it feels like that we know you. I mean, all of you here, because it's really mostly a constant students or like audiences here, and somehow, somewhere, maybe you can take part in one of the things that we would like to do in the future. But yeah, for now, this is where we are. And for us to be here more often, we would like to get your support. Share the video, give it a like if you find it, this program informative, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. Also to Africa Reimagined, which is Kwame's channel as well. It's all the programs we do together are also live streamed in on Africa Reimagined. And if you want to help us further with our PayPal account, you can find it in the description section, and you can donate to that. Let me try today to put it in the chat section, which I always forget to do. What are the topics that you would like us, to discuss? Let's hear it from you, like that you think kind of urgent, that you want to know about this and or that topic that's happening in the continent or globally. Oh, Dejuma said, I'm glad that Ethiopia is opening now for investors, like non-Ethiopian investors, and my wife is Ethiopian. Okay, yeah, people are connected. Good. Oh, somebody said topics to know Congo. We did some time ago about DRC. I'm sure Congo, you're talking about, there are two Congos. I'm sure you are talking about DRC, right?
Absolutely. I think he's talking about Democratic Republic of Congo. Definitely, we'll do a program on the Democratic Republic of Congo and the problems which are there. So we'll try to have a guest from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So I'll invite one of my brothers, who is a comrade of mine within the Africa Continental Unity Party. So I will invite him so that we can have a discussion together, and then he can even give us more light, at least what is on the ground. Can give you from a Pan-African point of view, but he will give us like really what is on the ground, what is happening with the people, because he's from Congo. So yeah, so we'll do a program on the Congo. I think Mallet, we need to note that. Another
Another
person,
one, yeah, you
yes,
read it.
another person has said he wants us to do on the root cause of African wars, of course. African wars, poverty. He spoke about the cause of poverty. Mallet, you should write it down. Eh? I think Gizi Gita is the one who was
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, so he said the cause of poverty. He's talking about the tribalism and African politics, tribalism and African politics, and the root cause of African wars. He said that, and then the root cause of poverty. The DR Congo, DRC region, by region would be good. DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. Yes, that one we said we'll do it. Okay.
yeah.
Somebody Kev Baby Bus.
Okay.
But I think he was saying is Congo garden, the Garden of Eden. It's possible. It's possible that it's the Garden of Eden. The whole East African region, if you look at history, people say that's where humans came from and stuff like that. That's where humans originated from, and then that's the same region, because remember it was not those countries. Anyway, the program is finished, you guys. We don't want to continue and talk about a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah. Let us know. I'm sure we always say it's not
Yeah,
just us spamming and sharing information. Sorry to
yeah, we'll get time
and
and we'll invite you guys. We'll invite you guys. We'll invite some people in the room so that
yeah, if you are anything that you are interested, that you are good at, and this is my area, I want to share, please write us and be our guest here. That's
yeah.
what I
So the,
want.
the email, Connect Africa's email has been put in the chat, so you can write to us and with a lot of suggestions. And then if you want to come in and contribute something, that would be great too. And
Yeah.
especially the diaspora, we are very much interested in you guys if you are in the diaspora.
All right. So, Kwame, thank you very much. Also, it is Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday for the last 2 weeks, including this week. We have been doing it daily. So, we will see if there's anything urgent for tomorrow. If not, definitely we'll be here on Saturday. Until then, thank you, Kwame. Thank you, all of you here, the family. And yeah, it's a bye bye from us for now. Ciao.
Thank you, Mahlet. Thank you, everyone. I think we have a lot we have a lot we can talk about. So I think there's a lot happening on the continent. So probably tomorrow we'll come back. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night or have a good evening and afternoon, depending on where you are. If you're in the United States, afternoon or good morning or something. All right, bye bye, everyone.
Ciao.